And here's a new challenge. This is a Saba. It doesn't belong to me, it belongs to a friend of mine. And this thing's been sitting on a shelf for years and years and years without being used. So before getting this thing into commission, he asked me to do a safety check and change capacitors and things like that. So he doesn't even know if it works. And this one actually is a bit of a challenge for me because I've done a few Sabas and they're pretty easy to recognize because there's a lot of information on them. But this one is different. This is obviously a Saba by the look and everything else. And there's the name and there's the logo. But this number, UW175Z, is something that's strange. I can't find reference to this anywhere. And so the first thing to do is try and find some kind of service information, schematic at least. And I don't really know where to find it because I've checked on Radio Museum. They don't know that reference. The Sabas worked on a few series, you know, things like, and they started sort of at the top end with the FREIBURG, and then second level was the Meersburg, and then you had things like the Willingen, Lindau, Freudenstadt. They had these series, and every year they'd come out with a new model, and you'd have the same number for each of those series. And the price range would be different for those different series. But this thing doesn't exist anywhere. I can't find this at all. I can't find it on Radio Museum. I can't find it on NVHR, which is the Dutch database. But anyway, there are a few hints here that would tell us what model this would be. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to use. One of the first things is that we see that this guy has got tone controls. There's the treble. And there's the bass, okay? Now, tone controls on the Sabas came out in the mid-50s. So we know this thing is from sometime in the mid-50s. And the reason the date is of interest to me is that I need to look for one of the known series that would be pretty similar to this one. Because the fact that this doesn't have FM singles it out as probably a specific export model. This thing has got off, and it's also in English. That's the other thing that's different on this one. There's off, there's the pickup, medium wave, shortwave 3, 2 and 1. So this is really a shortwave receiver with medium wave. So this must have been an export model, and I need to find which one of the normal Saba models is the most similar to this. And there are a few hints. We'll look at the back and I'll show you. Here's the back of the cabinet, and as you can see, all the labeling is actually in English, which is not normal for the ones I've worked on because I get them from Germany. There's the full reference number, UW175Z 3D. 3D gives us a hint that it's got quite a few speakers in there. The other thing that's a bit strange here is that it seems to have a battery option using how naughty, a vibrator model SB186 250 volt. This looks like it used some sort of inverter. Never seen that before either on a Saba or, yeah, especially on a Saba. But let's actually look at the back and see if we get any more hints. And for a start, this is where the pristine external condition betrays itself. This has been obviously on a shelf in a home where someone was meticulous about cleaning the furniture, but obviously the inside has got the years and years and years of accumulated dust, as is pretty obvious. Here's the first hint. This transformer is not from the, you know, the Freiburg 8-7 series. This is prior to that. So this will be before 1957, 58. It's got the voltage selector. Again, not the same as the usual series that I've worked on. This is the sort of connector for the battery option, whatever that does. And since this has got no FM, we've only got the AM capacitor there. There's a rotary antenna which is controlled by a knob on the front, and it obviously has the activation switch when this thing there, when you take it to the end, and then it works only on the external antenna. And here's the tube lineup. This is the other hint as to which model it might be. The tubes here are a ECH81. There's no FM, so usually you'd have an ECC85 if it was typical. This is the ECH81 mixer. There's an EF89 IF amplifier. This one uses an EBF80 detector preamp, whereas most of them would use an EABC80, but anyway, that's that. It has the usual EL84 power tube, but it also comes with an EZ80 rectifier tube. Now, most of the radios from this era in the Saba ranges use a selenium rectifier. So what I need to do is I need to look up, this is going to be quite a job trying to find a similar model, and I'm wondering whether I need to, but I don't know whether this thing works. I have no idea what might be wrong with this. It's been sitting for years. The caps are probably all gone. So I do need some sort of schematic, even if it's only partially similar to this one. But anyway, just to carry on, here we have the 3D effect. There's the main speaker, and then you have this satellite speaker on the side with a similar one on that side, and it's not stereo obviously, but they use this to spread the sound. And then of course with this massive cabinet, wooden cabinet, you get some pretty good resonance in here. So this would probably give us some pretty good sound. However, being only AM, there'll not be that much to listen to. But we've always got the pickup input, which can be put to some use to play music through, either a direct connection in or with a Bluetooth receiver. All right, I'm going to do some searching and see what I come up with, and I really don't know how I'm going to find this. I thought you could find anything on the internet, but all I find when I type in this reference is a few of them for sale, mostly in Italy, Spain and Portugal, which is a little strange because all the labeling is in English. So yeah, if I don't find the schematic, I'm sure we'll get through it, but depends on what state it is in, and I really don't know yet until I power it up and do some checking first. I think that's what I'm going to do next. As after finding whatever I find, I'll come back and report, but I need to do some checking on the power transformer and the output transformer just to make sure that this thing is more or less alive. Apparently it was working, 15, 20 years ago, but he's not sure about it now. And obviously any radio that's been sitting on a shelf for that long, tube radio, you really should not switch it on before it's been checked, because you could end up producing some magic smoke, not only on the radio but in the house itself. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to do some checking on the web and see if I can find that schematic. All right, I think we have some progress. The way I went about this is I tried to find when the models started to use the tone controls, because this has got the tone controls, and I found that it started in about 1953 with the Meersburg, Freiburg and so on. Before that there were no tone controls, so I knew we were plus 1953. Then I went one step further and I looked for the ones that used an EZ80 rectifier as opposed to a selenium rectifier, and I brought it down. It's actually worked its way down to two options, and they're both W5s, so 1954 1955s. And when I look for, this is NVHR.NL, it's very useful database. So when I put in there Saba, and I look for anything with W5, this is what I get. I get a Baden-Baden, which I believe, if I then link through, it goes to Radio Museum. That has got, yeah, that's got the tone controls, so that's a possibility. Then I look at the tube lineup, and I have ECC85, which is the FM tube, which I don't have here, obviously, but that ECH81 is correct. The F89 is correct. The ABC80 is wrong. I use an EBF80. It uses the EM80 Magic Eye, which is the same as this one. It's got the L84 power tube, and it's got an EZ80. So that's a possibility. That certainly is a possibility. So that's the Baden-Baden 5. Okay, that's one to keep in mind. It's got everything except the ABC80, which should be an EBF80, but that's not here nor there. That's just the detector. It could be a different tube. So that's one option. And the other one that I came up with, these guys don't have the Freudenstadt Bodensee doesn't have tone controls. The Freudenstadt W5 does have tone controls, but it's got the tone controls as well. It's the right shape. Again, 1954-55. That's ECH81, EF85. Wrong tube. So that's not it. Okay. Anyway, I did quite a bit of this off camera, and there's another possibility, which is the Wildbad W5. And the Wildbad W5 has the same tone controls. It has, forget about that ECC85, that's for the FM. I'm looking for a radio that's the same as one of these, but without the FM. That should be about the same. ECH81 is fine, EF89. Again, EABC80 instead of the EBF80. EM80 is right, EL84 is right, Z80 is right. Okay, so again, this is the same tube complement as the Baden-Baden W5. So my conclusion is I'm basically down to one of these, and I'm going to just get the schematics for this, and then also for the Baden-Baden W5. So I've got these two schematics, and this is where I spent quite a bit of time actually looking for the differences in them. There's one major difference, which, as you can see here, is on the speaker. That's got one speaker, and the W5 has got two speakers. Ours has got three. So obviously that was slightly different, but that's not important. That's not that important. The other thing that I look for, and I'll be quite honest, I didn't look for it, I found it, has actually got to do with the output tube. I noticed that this output tube the cathode is shorted to ground. So this led me to believe that we have to have a fixed bias, right? You see that output tube? That's the EL84. There's the cathode, and boom, it goes to ground. How is this thing biased? So I looked for I need about 6 volts here, minus 6 volts. And I thought, how the hell do you get minus 6 volts on here? But I go down here and I see, if you look at the power supply section, that this is where it gets a little bit strange. That power supply section here, what you can see is you've got ground over here where my cursor is. You've got ground over there, but everything else is referenced to this point over here. You see the filter capacitors? The negative is referenced to there. So what they've actually got is they've got this thing going below ground. This is minus 6.4 volts. This is your DC bias. So effectively, because your cathode, everything is referenced to this point, and your cathode of the EABC80 is connected to ground, it is connected to that point. And this effectively, 100 ohms with a 100 microfarad capacitor, this is effectively what's creating your negative 6 volts. And this is going to give you a bias, a fixed bias on the EL84. So this is fixed bias, okay? What about the Baden-Baden? The Baden-Baden, thankfully, is more to what we're used to. This has got a normal situation of 170 ohm and a 50 microfarad capacitor creating a cathode bias. And if you then go look at what's happening to the supply itself, the supply is obviously, boom, reference to ground. That is more normal. Now, we don't know what we have here. And the best way to find out is to look for the cathode, which is pin 3 of the EL84, and see if we have that shorted to ground, connected to ground, or whether we have a situation where we can actually see this thing, if we can actually see these two components. And that'll tell us if it's more similar to the Baden-Baden W5, which is this one here on the screen, or to the Volt-Butt W5. Okay, that's basically the main, those two are the main differences. Other than that, I've checked. The rest of the schematic, you know, the input circuitry is very, very similar. And we're not interested, obviously, in this part here. This section here, this whole FM is missing from our radio, okay? We're interested in this here. And you know, there'll be one more, because this would have had one shortwave band. We've got 3. So there will be one more, a bit more componentry, but it'll be basically very similar to this. And between these two schematics, those two sections are practically identical. You know, even to the extent that component values are the same. So we know that these two radios are very similar, with that main exception, which is that the biasing of the output tube is done. One is a fixed bias using a negative connection below ground, and the other one being the you know, the normal EL84 bias through a cathode resistor. So we need to look on the underside of this guy and see what it is that we got, and then we'll know which of the schematics is more similar. And I do believe the mystery is solved. If we go to pin 3, there's 1, 2, 3, we get this brown wire coming out here, sleeving. That goes to that connection, and that is a electrolytic capacitor with a 170 ohm resistor in parallel, shorted to ground. So this thing is cathode biased. So that tells us that we have something similar to the Baden-Baden W5, which is now the circuit that I'm going to print out and take it from there. So I'm going to take this out of the chassis, put it on my workbench contraption, and we need to try and see if we get any life out of it by powering it on very slowly. So that'll be that for now. The mystery's solved. I think we've got a circuit to work with, and I'm going to start preparing this for the first power up, and then we'll get back to the next video.